and welcome to Educators Without Borders with Chey and Pav, office hours in association with SchoolRubric.
We are your hosts, Chey and Pav from the Staff Room Podcast and The Drive. And this is, yes, a collaboration with SchoolRubric and the first episode of what we hope to be regular episodes, grouping together some of your favorite podcasters and educational leaders. Today, we are joined by the amazing Traci Browder, host of the Intelligogy podcast, and Samantha Fecich, host of the EduMagic podcast. Welcome, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us. We're really excited.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks so much.
All right, so let's dive into our conversation. Today, our topic is SEL, or social emotional learning, in the curriculum. We're going to be talking about why is it so important? Why are we talking about it? And how can we implement it in our classroom? So are you guys ready to get started with this conversation?
Very much so. Such a timely topic. Let's do it.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
So our first question is coming from Jeff Shirk, who is principal of the American School of Recife in Brazil.
We know lots about the importance of embedding SEL strategies to build the culture of the classroom or school space, but the conversation about how to embed SEL into our curriculum seems to be a new conversation. Why is it important for us to embed SEL in the curriculum and not compartmentalize it in a separate box?
What are your thoughts, guys?
Samantha, you want to go first? You want me to go?
Yeah, sure. So when I think of SEL, I think of the first word that comes to my mind is relationships. And I feel like relationships, it's kind of like that soft skill that we teach during college. Oh, you got to get to know your students and you have to know their strengths and their areas of need. But I think oftentimes that conversation stops after that first week. And I think building those relationships, getting to know our students is key. And it's something that doesn't end that first day of school or that first week of classes. It's something that we need to keep doing and continuing with our students, because we need to be able to know them as people before we can get that content out to them. And I think it's just kind of like one of those soft skills that maybe we mentioned, and as teachers, we mentioned this as an important topic, but it's so important now, especially during COVID, that we make these connections with our students. We start building those relationships.
I think that's a great response, Traci. It's up for you now. You take it, and then I'll follow up.
It's absolutely crazy, Samantha, first of all, that you started and led with relationships, because that's exactly what I'm going to lead with. In fact, I think it was last year, probably in April, that I actually wrote a blog post, and the title of it is Building Relationships with Care. But it didn't stop there. When I think about care, I'm like, I think we just gloss over that word. And so what does it mean to care about students? And I really, really sat down. I'm like, I know I care about students, but if I want to get educators to understand what that means, how can I package this? So I came up with an acronym, and it's not just really an acronym. It's like the code for caring and being the core of building relationships. You have to cultivate relationships. That takes work. You have to fertilize the seed. You have to nurture it. You have to pour water onto it. You have to always listen. And I believe we listen not just with our ears, we listen with our eyes. Like, are you okay? Chey, how was your day? We have to reach every single student, the quiet one, the one who always talks. You have to help him find balance so you can give the other space. And then we have to establish trust. So if you have all of those things in place, you are really laying the foundation to start building SEL into the curriculum.
Oh, those are two fantastic answers. You guys talked about relationships, which was so key. And you talked about longevity, that it can't just be a one-off. It's not 1 week of get to know you activities and I can check it off my box. It's continual work. And when I think of SEL in the curriculum, I've always thought of like, where's my starting point for understanding how I connect it to the curriculum? And I've always sort of thought of it's stress and anxiety with the subject matter. And typically, very often, there's lots of students that have a stress with math as a good example, or they have the stigma of math. And a great way to sort of deal with that social emotional component within the curriculum is that when I see a student know they have a stress and an anxiety with the subject matter, how am I going to change my teaching, change my lens to facilitate that? I really want to still get at the curriculum, but I want to do it on I almost say a culturally responsive way. And often students are alienated by the content. They're alienated by the curriculum because they're not seen in the curriculum, or they don't feel represented in the curriculum. And part of that social emotional component of learning is really making sure that we hear our student stories, share student stories, and make sure that we embed them in that curriculum. So if I'm doing math, Pav, I'm going to steal one of your great examples because you always talked about it. Well, I'll give you a chance to take some more notes. Is that she had this great math problem that, the kids weren't really connecting to, because it was about, I'm going to go on a boat. But our kids haven't been on boats. They're not on boats. Even if it's a soft alienation, it's still not seen in the problem, not seen in the question. And Pav altered it so that it was something really tangible the students could connect with. Oh, wait, I see myself in this problem. I can connect with this problem. And so those are sort of my nuggets. I just wanted to sort of, inspired by your guys' comments, was that idea of how do I connect it right in the curriculum? It's about avoiding alienation and really dealing with student stresses within the curriculum.
Yeah, you guys all nailed so many amazing points there. Sam starting with the relationships, and then Traci building upon that in regards to care and, really being there for our students in every way that they possibly could need. Chey, you mentioned the almost being culturally relevant and responsive. I think it's really important that we do include that as part of our embedding SEL in the curriculum, because so much of what our students bring into the space is completely, it's their stories that we need to have represented in our spaces. And so, that math problem was probably a game changer for myself in terms of figuring out that my students are not connecting to this. And it's not necessarily the wording of the question. It's not necessarily the math verbiage. It's actually the content. It's, they really can't connect to this because they don't have any lived experiences to be able to support this type of math question. So we turn the question into something that they can connect to. And this year, I'm continuing that right from the get-go with my students and making sure that the work that they're doing in our spaces is absolutely culturally relevant. They do have the ability to bring their stories to the table and talk about their learning in a way that they understand. And so, we continue that this year, and it starts with letting them discuss things that they're interested in. And this year it seems to be shoes. And so we bring shoes to the table every time, not literally on the table. I would get in trouble for that, but we bring them to the table every single day, and we talk about shoes, and this is what they love to do. So why not? And it's an easy tie-in. So that's the work that I think that we're doing now to really incorporate that social emotional component in our teaching. And I think it's paying off.
Absolutely, Pav. And as you were talking, and even Chey, there were a couple of things that came to mind that I really wanted to say, and I'm like, oh, we'll probably get to it later, but I'm going to go there. You mentioned equity, and that's, a couple of things come to mind. Like when we talk about SEL in the curriculum, I think a lot of people automatically equate it to, and I'm not minimizing this, but talking about feelings, but it's not just that, because kids ask, if a kid could ask an educator this question, these are the questions I feel that they would ask. Do I see myself in the curriculum? And not just do I see myself, how do I see myself being portrayed? Am I being fairly portrayed? And as educators, when kids come to us, if the curriculum triggers something, or if something just happened in the news, and Lord knows there's a lot happening in the news right now, and kids come in the classroom and want to talk about that, we can't be nervous and afraid and not go there, because we lose all respect of our kids if we don't go there. And when I say go there, even if we don't know how to go there, say, guys, this is out of my wheelhouse, but I'm going to do my best. I'm nervous. I don't know. So, and kids will hold your hand and walk with you. They just want you to go there with them.
Traci, as you're talking and I'm thinking about your CARE acronym, I'm thinking we can add lots of extra words to this. I'm thinking being authentic and, bringing your whole true self to your classroom, and being real with your students. Like you said, if it's not in your wheelhouse, just be like, okay, guys, not in my wheelhouse, but I love how you said they just want you to go there with them. They need someone along that journey, along that path, helping them to guide that way. I think there's a great quote by some educator out there that talks about how a teacher doesn't show you what to see, they show you how to see it. And I think that's, as educators, we have a great role to do that. We can help our students see different perspectives, different lenses, and help and just be authentic and be along with them for that learning journey, because we are all learners all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that vulnerability piece. Sorry, Chey. I noticed you were about to. Go ahead.
I was going to pick up because there's so many great points. Like it's a shame we're only going for a half hour, because I think we could do a 24-hour marathon. But and Traci, we've had some deep conversations. As you were talking, it brought me back to some of those conversations. And when I think of SEL in my space, and same thing that Sam was referencing, is that in my space, it's a richly diverse community. And I'm the white male in that space. So when I think of leading SEL, I really often think I don't lead SEL. Sometimes I can get in the way with it from being centered, regardless of whether I'm uncentered or not. And so where do I take my leadership? It's from my students. I have to make sure that I don't get in the way of their stories and the conversations they want to bring, because ultimately I realize that I dominate a space, even if I try with all my energies to not dominate a space. So when you guys were both talking, I was always thinking the work I do in SEL is, simplistically getting out of the way as much as I can and making sure that the stories are heard and students are heard. And I don't either block them intentionally or unintentionally, but just clear the road, because I am the white male in that space. And I do, take that look at myself quite often to say, I have to make sure that I'm learning from my students. It's their story. So I often think in my space, I don't lead the SEL. I'm just avoiding blocking it out.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Chey, for that awesome point about, being vulnerable with our students. I think it is very important for them to see that from us as their teachers, not being the be all and the end all of our classroom spaces. So something that I'd like you all to think about as we get to our second question is, we had a great question from a viewer, Steve, who mentioned, what about the teachers that are afraid of some of the topics that they're teaching, or the students are afraid, like, math sometimes can be a little bit of a gruesome topic for teachers to really get into deeply, because they may not have the understanding. So let's think about that as we get to our second question of the evening. And this question comes from Juliana Burchell, a school psychologist from Texas.
Hi, my name is Juliana Rochelle. I'm a school psychology intern in Texas. In what ways can we integrate social emotional learning in our teaching, programming, and curriculum? How do we teach content while using strategies to address the well-being of our students and reach the whole child?
All right, that's a great question. So how do we teach the content while using strategies to address the well-being of our students and reach the whole child? Anyone want to jump in first?
I'll go. I think it's a mindset shift. And what I mean by that is it was a great question. But we always think of SEL as strategies, and if we shift from strategies and just what's in our heart, if we teach from the heart and the soul, the SEL is just kind of natural in that. So it to me, it's not strategies. It's really, what are my core values in teaching and how I want to connect with students, and what platform and safe environment do I want to create? So with those things, it comes with, we have to respect the feelings of students. We have to respect their thoughts. We have to validate their thoughts. And we have to have this balance between caring and content. Today, in fact, several of my kids came on. It turned out they were just tired, but they weren't their normal perky, energetic selves. And instead of just pushing through with the content, because I had to teach this, I put the content to the side and I'm like, hey, y'all, let's talk. What's going on? What'd you do last night? How was it going? So and then they all started coming alive and talking. Just the fact that we see them and we sense that they're not okay. And it could just be as simple as tired, but it could be something else. But we can't miss those opportunities. So that's what I mean by it comes from the heart and caring and not being so focused on, I've got to teach this. Having that flexible model of instruction to know that you have the freedom to not be thinking, I've got to get through this. If I don't get through this, I failed as a teacher. No, you failed as a teacher if you don't see your kids and see what's wrong with them.
So I have to follow that? Oh my God.
Well, neither of us is going to, so it's you, Sam.
Y'all funny.
All right. Well, I wrote some notes. So whenever I heard this question, I thought of immediately there's a tool called Pear Deck, and they do some great SEL check-ins. And they have prompts for before a lesson, during a lesson, and then like end of the lesson type concluding things. But one that I really enjoy using with my students is it's a little scale that has a student in kind of the green zone. They're feeling okay. They're feeling great, ready to learn. Yellow is like, I'm a little distracted, but I'm okay. I'm here. Red is, I am not doing well. Not really present today. And as students come into class, it's anonymous. They can't see who puts their dot where. But as a teacher, I can download that data and I can go and I can check in with my students who are in that middle and higher range of how they're doing, and just checking in with them like, hey, I know you weren't feeling so great today in class, or hey, we missed you in class today. What can I do to help you out? How can I support you? How are you doing? Like just stopping and asking, how are you doing? I don't care about the class right now. Let's talk about you and what you need that we can help you be successful. Whatever that looks like. And then just checking in with our students in that way, whether it's like before a lesson or even during the week. I love just checking with my students. Every Friday, I send every single one of them a little DM saying, hey, how's it going? With like a funny video, maybe of kid president or kid superintendent, whatever happens to be catch my eye that week. But at the end, I always say, I'm here to support you. How can I help you out? It can be class related or not. And I love getting those responses that are not class related at all. And that's where you get to know your students and you get to start building those relationships with them in ways that just go beyond that classroom, and in this case, beyond the screen. And I think that's just the calling of a teacher, and only we get that gift to do that. And I think that's just so special to be able to do that with our students. Another neat graphic that they have in Pear Deck is what's filling your bucket and what's emptying your bucket, and thinking about, okay, what's filling my bucket? I get to see my friends. I got a great cup of coffee this week, and Starbucks red cups are out. This is filling my bucket. What's draining my bucket? Time management is definitely draining my bucket this week. And then like we're able to go in and connect on some of those areas and give strategies and just help them out. Everybody needs help, no matter if you're a kindergartner or an adult learner. I think every student needs support. Every teacher needs support. And I think it's important to think about SEL for teachers too.
Mm-hmm.
Pav, I would jump in, but I'm just going to take your example. So you're welcome to go. And then I'll brainstorm something for myself afterwards.
I'm going to have to start stealing from you too when we're on the air. Go ahead.
Well, I had nice, neat notes, and then there's just gems being dropped all over this. So now it just turns into a messy sketch note that I'll take a photo of, and I'll say, in here is just so much brilliance. It's just, there's so many places to jump in, and I'm going to sort of piggyback on one, is I've always been a proponent of, and everyone's touched upon this, is that the relationship work has to be ongoing. It has to be meaningful, it has to be authentic. And I've always been a big fan of, I actually do my best relationship work. And of course, my only experience is middle schoolers, but I do my best relationship work when I show them how I'm going to create learning opportunities in my space. And so the more I can embrace their stories, the more I can embrace inquiry, the more I can embrace exploration, the more I can embrace questioning, I always find that's good SEL practice, where I don't center myself as the teacher, and that as the teacher, what I do in the lessons I create, the activities I design, is I demonstrate that I'm going to be their advocate. I'm going to be their ally. Pat, I've always joked, I can't do get to know you activities for 6 months. And great relationships aren't built in 2 weeks. Great relationships are built over time. And so I've always thought my greatest tool to building a relationship is showing the students how I'm going to create the learning environment, the learning space, and am I going to be a really strong advocate and ally for all the stories they're sharing? And if I can do that, then I think I'm going to solidify the best relationships with those middle schoolers. And if I could give an example, and it's actually one of my own, when we were doing Remembrance Day prep this year, and I come from a strong military background, so I think it's important, but then I realized I center the colonial experience of Remembrance Day. So I went very intentionally this year, and we took some neat photos of them, and then they found a photo that honored Remembrance Day from their culture. So it wasn't the traditional colonial battles. And then we did this really neat superimposed picture with the picture behind them was the story from Venezuela, Nigeria, Jamaica, India, the Philippines. Like it was fantastic. And they were so connected to sharing their story through the curriculum, where maybe 5 years ago I would have said, let's talk about World War II. And those are obviously so important, but in that sort of SEL mind frame, I said, how am I going to make sure my students are represented? How am I going to make sure their stories are heard, and thus the relationship is really solidified? Because I said, look, my teacher, you know what? He wants to know who I am. He wants to really make sure that my identity is represented in everything we do.
Thanks, Chey, for all of those great comments. And you claim to steal from me, but I stole absolutely from you this week, because that activity was so powerful in your classroom space that I wanted to bring that to my classroom space to see how my students would work with them being just a little bit younger than your students. So we absolutely did, and it worked so well. And you're right, because the students were able to connect it to their own lives, it just made it so much more powerful. And we talked about, the need to flee from your country because of civil unrest. And that notion connected with so many students in my classroom that it just turned the activity into something so much more powerful for them. And then the discussion that ensued after that was that much more powerful than even that, because they were able to bring actual real life examples to the table, whereas in the past they may not be able to connect as well, and they're being taught at rather than taught with. And so it was indeed a very key way for us to be able to bring that conversation to the table. I wanted to just jump right back to something that Sam had mentioned, the green and the yellow and the red. Those we are familiar with those zones of regulation as well. And that check-in strategy actually was something that we began to employ a little bit more when we were teaching virtually. And, that was really the first time that we felt like we really needed to check in with our students, because we were so concerned about how they might be coping and dealing with their new learning environments. And that just sort of continued as we became face-to-face teachers this year as well, and really checking in with our students and their families and everything that they were going through at the time. And we really felt that bringing that family component into the space really made it more of a community feel. And I know I'm looping back and forth all over the place. There's so many dots to connect here. Just jumping back to Steve's comment about the math from earlier, creating this whole community atmosphere, not just between the students and the teachers and their families, but with other teachers, in your professional learning network, and learning from each other. I know that I am far more comfortable this year talking about certain aspects of the curriculum than I was in the past, just because we've created this incredible community and have been able to check in with one another as well. And that whole community feel, it follows you into your classroom space. And we really feel as though we can bring all of that learning that we do through each other to our students, and we feed off of that and they feed off of us, and that energy really gives us everything that we need to be able to have really quality learning and really address the whole child in that way.
It's funny. You saw me smile big. You might not be able to see it, but I have written right here to make sure I say it: family connections. Like that is, oh gosh, I won't even because I won't stop talking. But you have to connect with the families. Like, for instance, I will say this. A few weeks back, I picked up the phone and I called literally every parent. I'm like, how are you doing? Like, not adjusting to school. Like, how are you doing? And parents were like, wow, and I learned so much. And then the surprise was people asked me, wait, how are you doing? So it became this back and forth sharing of our hearts, and we bonded. It was like next level bonding. And so we have this trust and this platform and this space where, we've shared tears. That's the bond that my parents and I have built, and the kids feel so safe because we've created that kind of space for them.
Yes, indeed.
I made myself stop. But I will add, not on the family piece, but just a couple of other thoughts. Like, along with the zones of regulation, I have been an emoji wall, especially for the lower grades. Like, they don't have a problem. They connect with emojis and they think that's so cool. But, if I'm seeing the sad face or a frown or even angry, it gives you an opportunity. What's going on? I saw what you put on the wall. What's up? And not that you have to talk openly in the class. It could be an intimate side conversation, but just empowering them to express how they feel in a fun way. And then they start to know, she's going to talk to me about that. And it translates into kids checking on each other. Now that's the sweet spot. That's really the talk about zones. That's the zone you want to be in, is creating an environment where kids start connecting and checking on each other too.
Oh, I could jump in on that one, because now I start to that connect on kids. I start to think of the culturally responsive pedagogy, and when we were in our staff meeting this year, we talked about like what's to look for of whether you're really doing the work in your class is when you start to see your students advocating and being an ally of their peers. That is a great takeaway, to know the work, the message, the philosophy you're preaching is really resonating between. So, Traci, when you said that, I immediately just jumped to that, because I remember in our staff, and I said that's to look for. When your students start to advocate and take allyship of each other, then you know that the culture is just and the learning is just so rich and so deep in your learning space. So I'm glad you touched on that, because it just gave me another talking point.
Yep. Well, Chey, let me add this real quick to that point. We have to set the stage for that. And we do that by, a lot of people say don't use I, but we have to, because it's coming from their hearts. So there needs to be, you have to create this environment of expressive language. I feel, I like it when, I appreciate that you. I kind of didn't like it when, and if we start giving them the space to do that, it just opens up for dialogue and communication. And people are like, I didn't know that. Like, I just used that same practice with a teammate, and she was like, I had no idea. I feel so bad. Just being free to share and knowing that it's a safe space, and then everybody grows from it.
Yes, indeed. And just to wrap up here, does anyone have any final thoughts as we take away these amazing takeaways from yourself, Chey and Traci? Sam, do you have any takeaways or any final thoughts before we wrap up tonight?
I just want to thank Traci for that CARE acronym. That really resonated with me, and I think as a group of podcasters on Educators Without Borders, we can come up with an SEL one for authentic, real representation, and just talk about how we can impact our learners through that CARE model. That really spoke to me today. So thank you, Traci. I love learning alongside all of you. So this was fantastic.
Has been a really good chat. And Sam, we've been playing podcaster tag for like 6 months now. So we're glad.
I feel like it's been like a year.
Probably a year.
I was lasted a long time.
But we're really glad to connected. We're really glad we joined up for this 30-minute chat. I know we could go longer, but we will wrap it up. And we want to thank SchoolRubric for really hosting us and giving us this great platform. And we're so thankful that anyone came and joined the space. I think to take us out, why don't Sam and Traci, why don't you share what you got going, and so people can sort of connect with you another way and see what other projects you got on the go. We'll start with you, Traci.
Okay. So Intelligogy, the podcast, that's where I talk to you, you talk to me. I am working on a book with DBC on the happiness of teaching. That's really exciting. And I think the last thing that's really something passionate is Grit Crew EDU, where a dear friend of mine, Dawn Harrison, Shelley Burgess, and Beth Huff and I, we're really working in the social media space on anti-racism, equity, and that diversity conversation. And then Dawn Harris and I are now consulting and partnering with school districts in that same realm, guiding them the whole year through equity, awareness, diversity, anti-racism. So that's what I've got going on, and loving it, and thankful to have the opportunities, and especially SchoolRubric for giving us this space tonight. And Voice Ed Radio. Cannot forget Voice Ed Radio. Whoa. Having a lot of fun with Voice Ed Radio and podcasting.
Awesome. Samantha?
Yeah. Hey, so I'm Dr. Sam Fecich, and I have a podcast just for future teachers. It's called EduMagic, and that's kind of my jam. Aspiring educators. Have a book out called EduMagic, a guide for pre-service teachers, and another book, EduMagic Shine On, a guide for new teachers. So I love working with that group of educators. They're so passionate and excited to get into education. And I just love being a stop on their journey to being educators of excellence.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. You're doing such amazing things in the field of education. We're so proud to be connected to you through so many different avenues, including SchoolRubric. Chey and myself, obviously, we host the Staff Room podcast, and we also host The Drive on Voice Ed Radio on Sunday evenings from 8:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. So please tune in to Voice Ed Radio to listen to some awesome tunes and have some light-hearted educational banter before you get back into the work week every Monday. So that's what we are up to. And Chey, do you have any last words before we head out?
No, this has been no, and then yes, I guess I said no, and then just immediately began to speak. This has been fantastic. I'm so glad we've all connected. I'm so glad that SchoolRubric has connected us all to have this wonderful conversation. And I actually, now that we're done, I'm actually looking forward to more, and I would love to connect with all of us again to have some more rich conversation, because I'm sure there's many a different topic that we can dive in and really share some really rich dialogue. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We really appreciate it.
Night, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you for watching SchoolRubric's Educators Without Borders Office Hours with Chey and Pav. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on social media accounts to access the latest stories, interviews, podcasts, and panels from educators around the globe. Or visit us online at schoolrubric.com.